Good morning. My name is Jerry Beverland. I'm the mayor of Oldsmar, and this is November the 20th, 1998. And what we're doing this morning is continuing our series of history lessons on the city of Oldsmar, and we welcome you to this. We have a very special guest this morning. His name is J.W. Campbell. He was born in Safety Harbor in 1923, and his father was born in Safety Harbor in 1898. Now, you can't get any more southern Safety Harbor Oldsmar cracker than that. And we want to welcome you this morning, J.W., to this furthering continuation of the city of Oldsmar and the surrounding areas. Before we start with some questions to you, I'd like to bring the folks up just a little bit on what we've done before. This is about our 5th series of this, and we want to thank TCI for helping us do this. Oldsmar was founded by Ransom E. Olds in 1916. He bought 54,000 square miles, which included northwest Hillsboro, northeast Pinellas, part of Safety Harbor, and part of Clearwater. He paid a total of $450,000 for all this land. He had the ambition and the desire to build a large community here that would service the people from Detroit as their winter home. He also had ambitions of making Oldsmar a large agriculture area, and his ambitions were kind of thwarted because of the Oldsmar, the Florida land bust. A building stopped in the 20s. The 1921 hurricane destroyed a lot of Oldsmar. The stock market crash in 1929 finally just took Oldsmar out of the picture. What the REOs did is that at the time he had Tampa Downs. As we know, Tampa Downs, we'll get into that just a little more in a minute. Tampa Downs was not quite finished, and he traded that for the Fort Harrison Hotel in Clearwater. And he traded the rest of the land that he owned in Oldsmar for a hotel in Kansas City, Kansas, and some cash. Now in 1926, the people here in Oldsmar changed its name to Tampa Shores. Well, that didn't work out so well. Some of the older residents didn't like that. In 1937, they changed the name of Tampa Shores back to the city of Oldsmar. There's a lot of history that goes with Oldsmar and the surrounding area, and this is why we're having these conversations with different people, especially with people like J.W. that's been here all his life since 1923. He knows the area as well or better than I do, or the people that have moved here in here later in their lives. J.W., welcome to this series of Histories of Oldsmar.
Thank you, Jerry.
Let's start with, you mentioned to me one time about Booth Point at the Mobley Bay area, and I was kind of surprised. I know that McMullen booths were very prominent here, but I had never heard of Booth Point.
Well, even some of your old maps listed as Booth's Point. Presently, it's known as the Higgins Power Plant. But when I was a child growing up, all the way from around the Oldsmar Pier out to the end of this peninsula was known as Booth's Point. Now, what booth it was, I don't know, but it was just a rutted, sandy road that went all the way out. And a lot of us old timers would gather and have fish fries, cookouts. My dad would catch the mullet, and my uncle would go cut a swamp cabbage. And we'd have fried fish, hush puppy grits, and swamp cabbage. Well, also in this same area, I had a great uncle that he harvested the oysters out that way, said it was the best oysters there was in the county, and he supplied the Bellevue-Biltmore with oysters in the oyster season. So that's about the history on Booth's Point.
Well, before you go any farther, you mentioned a word that a lot of these northerners don't know what you're talking about. Tell us what a swamp cabbage is.
All right, a swamp cabbage is one of our palm trees. They prominently grow around a sandy, salt marsh areas. And what they do, they will go and cut down the small palm trees and pull away what we always call the boots. It's the remaining of the limb after they've been cut off, and work our way down to the heart. And if you get too low in the heart, the contents was bitter. But we would take and boil that in a seasoning with white bacon. And it was better than the cabbage that we buy in the grocery store today.
Well, that palm tree is actually the palm trees that grow everywhere in the state of Florida. It's just a cabbage palm. That's why they call them cabbage palms.
It's a cabbage palm, and I think it's one of the trees of Florida.
It is one of the trees of Florida. Okay,
Right.
now how about Mobley Bay and around that area?
Mobley Bay, I never was around that a lot, but that was a great fishing area. And somewhere in that area, Mobley Bay and Boost Point, there was a creek that was called Bowles Creek. I think I back in on it later in my teenage years, but I had a school teacher in my first grade named Miss Bowles, and she lived on Bowles Creek. I remember going out there as a child for some reason with my parents, but I've lost track of it.
Well, I interviewed Mrs. Bowles' daughter, and I never knew that there was a Bowles Creek that ran into Mobley Bay. Would that have come off from Double Branch, do you think?
I think it was a little bit west of Double Branch.
West of Double Branch, so it must still be there somewhere then.
Yeah, I think it's out on the edge of that point, or it may have been altered when they built the power plant.
Okay.
Could be part of that.
Okay, so we come back out from Booth Point to Mobley Bay, back up to St. Petersburg Drive. By the way, St. Petersburg Drive was named because it was the only road from Tampa to St. Petersburg.
Right.
Right?
Right. Well, on that same area, we had the old Hotel Skeleton down close to the pier that was started during the boom, and then, as you say, in the land bust, construction halted, and it just remained there for years, just the framework and the concrete work. And in later years, one of the prominent residents, Lester, I believe it was Joe.
Bud Lister.
Okay.
And Joe.
I went to school with one of the Lesters. He put in a conveyor factory there. And when that was demolished, I don't know.
Well, it wasn't demolished. Actually, Bud sold it to an individual, and that individual brought in a yacht and got it stuck out into Tampa Bay. It got grounded out there, and then it was resold again to Roger Kumar.
Oh.
Now, Roger Kumar has made it into his house.
Oh.
The whole area has been remodeled, and it's a very beautiful building now.
So part of the old structure is still being utilized then?
Every bit of it, the whole ground floor of it.
Uh-huh.
And it's one big house.
Right.
Okay, go on with St. Pete.
Okay, and then down next to where the dock is, the pier, as a child, I remember a pavilion. We would go there on the 4th of July, Labor Days, and they had big parties, picnics, celebrations. But I just have a vivid picture of that in my mind. I don't know whether you know anything about it.
Well, that pavilion in the beginning was actually a casino. And during Prohibition, the people from St. Petersburg and those from Tampa that couldn't get their liquor would come to the city of Oldsmar, and they would get it there at the pavilion.
Oh.
And then or at the casino, then it was later turned into pavilion, as you said. And then in the early 1950s, it was torn down.
It was. Mm-hmm. Well, then I'd like to come on back out. Being as we're in that area, around the marina, coming in off St. Petersburg Drive, is what they call Possum Bayou. And the creek going west off of that is Moccasin Creek. And that was always full of oysters. I don't know why so many oysters grew there, but you couldn't hardly fish for the oysters there. And then as you come around St. Petersburg Drive, a little branch comes under the road. That's Possum Branch. So that's related with the Possum Bayou. And Moccasin Creek continues to the west, and it meanders all up past Sparrow Rand Place today. All right, we'll come on around to the school. Long as I can remember, they had that little school there, went through the 6th grade. And I can't help but think of the school and Miss Tyree.
Miss Tyree.
To me, she was the principal, the teacher, the janitor. She run that school for years. And it only went through the 6th grade. And the students, when they finished there, they were bused to Safety Harbor. I had a lot of friends from Oldsmar that come to Safety Harbor junior high, 7th, 8th, and 9th grades. Well, there again, when they finished there, the junior high school, they had to be bused to Clearwater to finish out their senior high school period. So the students, they had to keep changing schools every step that they made in their education.
I think later on, when Dunedin High School was built, then that's the after finishing Safety Harbor, they would go to Dunedin to graduate from high school later on.
I imagine that a lot of them went, like you say, to Dunedin and maybe even Countryside. I don't know.
Well, they go to Countryside now.
Yeah, there's a lot of new schools that.
I want to go back to Possum Bayou and Possum Creek so people will realize where this is. When you're going from on St. Petersburg Drive into Dunedin in Oldsmar, there at the marina, that little bridge they go over, that's Possum Creek.
That's Possum Branch.
Possum Branch.
Yeah.
Now, just before, as they start going over the new long bridge to the right, that's Possum Bayou, right?
The Long Bridge?
The new bridge.
The new bridge, no, that was always referred to, you talking about on towards Safety Harbor and Dunedin?
No, yes.
Okay, the new bridge they just built, we always referred that to the head of the bay.
Head of the bay?
And to the west, before they built this outfall canal, there was 2 creeks. They called it double bridges. Before the bridge was built, the route to Safety Harbor, Dunedin, they had to come on down what is now Tampa Road to about Sparrow Rand Place. And then there was a graded road that went south, and little wooden bridges crossed these 2 creeks. That's the reason they called it double bridges. And it come over to 580 about the fruit stand that's out there that used to be operated by Humphreys, called the Tangerine Shop.
Right.
I believe today it's the Sun Grove.
Right.
But that was a route to Safety Harbor and Dunedin. From McMullen Booth and 580, there was no road into Dunedin. Had to come back in McMullen Booth Road, which was then Haynes Road. But people going from Tampa to Safety Harbor, especially St. Petersburg, they generally had a 2-day trip. My mother lived at one of those creeks, on the banks of one of those creeks. And they had a large pasture and barnyard. And a lot of times the people from Tampa would camp overnight at that location, then continue on their journey either way the next day.
We have to say this again. The journey from Tampa to St. Petersburg was a 2-day journey.
It was about a 2-day journey.
And they had to go through the city of Oldsmar to get there.
They had to come in what was now Tampa Road. I don't remember what the name of that road was. And the road, Curlew Road, didn't exist. And the road going across the head of the bay did not exist. So therefore, they had to go around where these 2 creeks merged from the head of the bay.
But let's see, now that's something I didn't know. See, you always learn something new going through this. Okay.
Uh-huh.
All right, go ahead with the school on down to St. Pete Drive.
All right. After we leave the school, the next point that I remembered was the Ruigs, family named Ruigs, had a grocery store on the north side. It was a two-story building, and that was the only grocery store I knew of. There could have been more. But one of the Ruig boys, Otto, was one of the first casualties in World War II. He was the first one in our area to get killed in action. And then we'll come on down to where St. Petersburg Drive meets the Tampa Road in the apex. There was a service station operated by Zimmerman. It operated for years. And then we'll come on down to the county line at Racetrack Road on Tampa Road. There was a service station and a cafe on the northwest corner. You could stop in there and get your gasoline or maybe get a sandwich or a cup of coffee. And they had two of the best looking red-headed girls that there was in the county. I went to school with one of them. There was Juanita and Marie. So we would stop there a lot of times just to chat with the school chums. And then when we leave there, we will go down Racetrack Road, like you mentioned, to where the racetrack is today. I understand that was inaugurated in February of 1926, and it was called the West Coast Jockey Club. Well, that operated till the land boom busted and everything closed down. And later years, it reopened, I think, as Tampa Downs.
Tampa Downs.
And who inaugurated that, I don't know.
Well, wasn't it called Sunshine?
This is the only place only thing I ever remember was the West Coast Jockey Club
West
and
Coast Jockey Club.
the Tampa Downs, yes.
Okay.
I do have a picture somewhere that shows it as such. And after we finish this, we'll come back up to the Tampa Road. At Tampa Road and where the Racetrack Road is.
Before you get there, there's another historical area out by Tampa Downs that we had talked about coming up here.
Oh yeah.
We had our infamous oil well.
Right.
That never had oil in it at night until somebody put some oil into it for the investors for the next morning, so they could see that the oil was there.
Yes, this was in 1921, I understand, that Mr. Olds, he decided he was going to drill for oil. And I believe the initial cost was $100,000 that he paid to put down a 20-inch casing. And how much drilling they did, I don't know. But he sure drew the crowds. I've got some old pictures that shows the crowd gathering, along with the boom, the derrick. But what I've always heard, there was a little oil and a lot of salt water. Whether it was doctored, I never knew that.
Well, there was a little oil, and it was always there in the morning, and it was doctored.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they got investors for it.
Right.
But we're very famous for our fake oil well. Go ahead.
Okay, and if we finish there, at the county line and the Tampa Road, that is the starting of the Memorial Highway going into Tampa. This gives Hillsborough a little boost. But at that time, that was the only road, the old Memorial Highway, that wound and twisted around across the narrow creeks, so they didn't have as much bridge work built. And it went all the way into Armenia and I believe Kennedy. Now, it was, I don't remember the old name, but at Armenia, and the county line, there was about a 20 or 25 foot marble monument at each end of that roadway. This commemorated the veterans of World War I. And in between those 2 points, there was a marker about 4 foot high, made of marble, that was posted every mile. Give you a mile marker all the way from Oldsmar to Armenia and Tampa. And in between these, they lined it with oak trees and oleanders. And my dad said that those oak trees they killed more people than the war did, because you only had about a 24-foot highway, and the old tires you had to patch. You better not go from Safety Harbor to Tampa without a tire pump, and a spare tire, and some patching. But also at the entrance there at Oldsmar had this archway across the highway. I don't know what the inscriptions were. I'm talking back now when I was a 7, 8-year-old boy.
It read, "Welcome to Oldsmar."
So it had it on that side.
And I wished we had that. I wished we had that archway, but we don't know where it ever went.
Those things have a way of disappearing.
Well, now, you spoke of the monuments. The monument at the other end of Memorial Highway going by Kennedy is still there. The one in Oldsmar, we don't know whatever happened to the monument, but the base of the monument was there forever, up until that they're 6-laning Tampa Road now. Well, we saved the base of that monument.
We do have that.
We pulled it up and took it over to the sewer plant.
Was there any inscriptions on that?
No. But we never found out what has happened to the actual monument itself.
Mm-hmm.
On the top of it was an eagle.
Oh.
And we don't know what happened to it.
Oh, it's too bad. So anyway, after we leave there, we'll go back west down the Tampa Road, past St. Petersburg Drive, and to the north on that side of the road, I think is where Olds had his big farm. His main crop was sugar beets. Why sugar beets, I don't know. But I had a great uncle, C.C. Moore, that was field foreman for Mr. Olds. And he was an avid beet grower. He could raise beets. Even after he moved on his home gardens, he raised beets. And where he shipped them, I don't know. I never heard. But he was quite a farmer there in the beets, and I don't know what else. For a lot of the young people, or even some of the elderly people, they don't know what sugar beets are. I'm originally from Idaho, and of course Idaho is famous for their potatoes. Right.
But they also grew as much sugar beets as they did potatoes in Idaho. So a sugar beet is actually made into sugar.
Yes. Same as sugar, like sugar cane, yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I often wondered maybe if he grew sugar cane too, but I never heard of a refinery or anything like that he might have had.
But the sugar beets, that was his main crop.
That was his main crop.
Okay.
And next to that, in my memory, was the old Rio factory, and where he started out trying to make his go in tractors.
Okay, now the REO's tractor company, as you remember, is on the north side of Tampa Road?
Right.
About what location would it be now?
I would say about halfway between St. Petersburg Drive and the railroad, where the railroad crosses Tampa Road.
Would it,
more or less opposite the downtown area.
Okay, right where where the sign company is now.
Somewhere, yes, there's a sign company and a truck topper place, right?
Right.
It was right next to, I believe it was the electric company. It was all pretty much in the same area. They did have electric company there for years. I thought it was Tampa Electric,
It was Oldsmar.
But I understand it's Oldsmar.
Oldsmar, we service Safety Harbor. And they got mad at us whenever they would go down because they couldn't publish the Safety Harbor Herald. We have articles about that. So the REO's tractor family, the tractor factory was on the north side, about where the sign company is now.
Yes.
Now they did manufacture tractors there,
Right.
grubbing tractors, and the only problem with the tractor was it didn't have any reverse. So whenever it got stuck in this Florida sand, they couldn't get it out.
I had to keep going one direction.
Yep.
Well, of course, all this closed in the Depression time, and part of one of those buildings was used for a transit camp. Florida had several transit camps around, and the history column in the Tampa Tribune listed several here a couple of years ago, but they eliminated one in Oldsmar. So I contacted this writer, and he asked if anybody else knew anything about it, but no one ever responded. But I do know that there was a transit camp, because I would go with my grandmother and a couple of her friends over there and watch boxing. They had a boxing ring, and on Saturday nights we would go over there and see the boxing of these fellows. There was transits throughout the state that were down and out and just had to have a place to stay.
So that's something else I did not know. That was in the same area where the REO's factory was?
Yeah, it was the same area, yeah. They utilized that building for a camp.
Okay.
And as we come on down, we get right close to the railroad, you had this big automobile garage. And I don't know whether there was some name, but when I was growing up, one of my school chums' family operated this garage named Campbell. And that garage stayed there for years.
Was that Lon Gamble's father?
Well, it was Ross Campbell is one that I knew by name that went to school with me.
Then that must have been Lon Gamble's father.
It could have been, right.
Lon was born here in Oldsmar, so that was Gamble's garage. And that was on the north side of Tampa Road also.
Right.
You're clearing a lot of things up here. There's been some discrepancies and discussions of where these buildings actually were. So down by the railroad tracks is where this Oldsmar garage was.
Yes, close to the railroad, yeah. A little bit east of it, but it was getting down close to the railroad.
Okay, then that must have been right about where Joe Lister had his place later on.
I never knew where Joe had his.
Okay. Which is now a holding pond for Tampa Road.
Oh, kind of toward the face of the earth there. Yeah. Well, we come on down. We can go to where 580 intersects the Tampa Road. There was this large wooden building, 2-story. It was called the Rex Cafe. And in later years, it was named the Heidelberg.
The Heidelberg.
Yes.
That's for people that, this is going to be interesting to the people that live at Forest Lakes. Off in Tampa Road, the entrance into Forest Lakes, the entrance into the Winn-Dixie, that road that you go in, the Heidelberg set right in the middle of that. And they had to tear the Heidelberg down to make the entrance to the Forest Lake subdivision.
No, I knew it was torn down, and what subdivisions are back in there, I don't know. But it was a little honky-tonk dance hall and beer joint, along with the cafe. And they had a lot of business there. It was one of the prominent places. And while we were in this area, out back in that forest, we used to say Forest Lake, they did a lot of timber work, logging. And every road that went off of what is now Tampa Road, which was only about 3 dirt roads, they had a lot of cattle in that area also. I think it's the starting of Boot Ranch But these roadways had what they call a cattle gap. They fenced up to each side of this roadway, and then they dug a hole, a trench, across the roadway and lined it with either galvanized pipe or cypress logs. That way an automobile or truck could cross it, but a cow or pigs, they could not walk across it without falling in. They get their foot hung up. So that way they kept the cattle on one side and the other side free of them, because we had an open range at that time too. But this tram road, they had a tram road out there.
Now, the tram road was for what?
It was for logging.
Okay.
They would log these trees, haul them over on this tram to the sawmills. I know of two that was on what is now East Lake Road, which was the road to Brooker Creek. There was two large sawmills, but even into the late 40s, part of this roadway was still there because some of the old cross ties were still laying on the old tram roadway. And most of them were cypress. But my dad, back in the 30s, he operated a wood business, sold firewood, and he salvaged a lot of those cross ties that were made out of pine and then cut up into firewood. It was just a free range. You could go out there and gather any wood. I think the state owned most of it, yeah, because of the taxes. But there was 2 or 3 sawmills around where they cut all this timber. That's about all I have in that area. Of course, I can come back out while on Tampa Road at that area. Across from, I believe it's Cox Lumber, is it out there today? Yes. West of the old Rex Cafe. Right. Sperry Rand. Well, that area between the road and Moccasin Creek was developed into a gladiola flower farm. They operated this flower farm for years. I guess this was in their 40s. And when it went down, some reason or another, they stopped growing them there. Someone went in and planted I guess 15, 20 acres of cabbage. I was driving a truck at that time hauling fruit. Well, this was about 1951, 52. Just as these cabbage got up and mature, large heads of cabbage, here come a freeze. And I think it burst every head of cabbage in that pot, in that garden farm. And I didn't think much about it at the time, but about a week later I passed there. You'd have thought you was in Germany at a sauerkraut factory at the odor that the place put out. Of course, there was no residents, no businesses or anything around, so it just fouled up the neighborhood, the area, because no neighbors.
Well, the people at East Lake Oaks that are moving in now to that new subdivision will be interested to know that at one time, where their house is built now used to be a cabbage farm.
Yes, wasn't that at one time named the Green Tree?
Yes. For
subdivision or something like that. Mm-hmm. But right in that same area is where this road I told you earlier went across double bridges over to Sun Grove, across the Sperry Rand. It was a graded road. And the bridges were built close to the water. And then they built this outfall canal, which destroyed both creeks. Thank you. There's no more double bridges creeks.
And that outfall canal destroyed all the oysters.
That's right. My dad used to gather oysters out of that place.
And would you agree that the outfall canal has destroyed the upper Tampa Bay?
Yes, I will. I will.
Thank you.
Along with that sewer plant that Clearwater has built up at the head of the bay.
Thank you.
I think that both of those did a lot of damage to that area. I didn't have this in mind earlier, but I don't remember what year, but we had, I believe it was around 36, that washed out part of the railroad bed that crossed the head of the bay before you get to 580. And we had a terrible train wreck there. The train went through and it was all washed out, so it just toppled over.
Oh, really? I have never heard this before.
Yeah, this was in the 30s. I don't know whether there's any injuries or deaths, but I was just a young boy, 10, 12 years old. But I remember going out there and looking at it. But that hurricane did that. I believe it was 36. So then too, you know, the St. Petersburg Waterworks goes across there also. They have their pipeline, crosses the bay there. They dammed that up and where they could dig the trench and bury these pipes that go back to Odessa.
Right, now they've got it over the bay.
They got it over.
Now they put the pipes over the bay.
They did away with the underground
Yep.
pipes.
They did with the underground pipes. When they built the new bridge, they took the piping over it.
Right, okay, I didn't know that. Of course, I haven't got around Oldsmar much in the past few years, but then my other memories of Oldsmar is going back downtown. I never knew the name of the streets, but where City Hall and the bank is.
State Street.
State, all right, that was, I believe it was a concrete roadway.
Yes.
It was a very wide
Yes.
roadway that come right down through town. And then there was wasn't there a parkway light that went from there to the bay?
Yes.
It seemed like it rode on each side of
It's called Park Street, Park Boulevard.
Park Boulevard, okay. Well, I remember those two were about the only paved areas that there was in Oldsmar. There were so many streets that was unpaved.
All of them.
I remember one, we had some relatives that lived down behind the school. You better not try to go there in the wet season. You couldn't get in. But along State Street then, you had the City Hall, the bank building, and then you had, I believe it was called the Wayside Inn.
The Wayside Inn.
It was a hotel-like, and that drew a lot of people to Oldsmar. It was quite a building. And then it was destroyed by fire. I believe it was in the 40s that it was destroyed.
Yeah, the late 40s, early 50s, yes.
It was. But that was a downfall for Oldsmar. All right, and on the north side of State Street was a big open area they used for a trailer park.
Right.
They had all the people that come in there from all over the United States brought their tin can trailer and camped there through the winter. What the draw was, I don't know, because the racetrack was closed. And what the activity they did besides go fishing or sit in the sun, I don't know. But the reason I remember that so much, I was a helper on an ice truck. And that was the day before electric refrigerations very much. And I would go in and out those little trailers putting in a 12 and a half, 25, 50 pounds of ice. And I met a lot of people there that just come down to visit and to linger through the winter. So then the last memory that I have that I can recall is the water tower. Beyond that, I believe it was down pretty close to the bank building. They had a wooden water tower, and that supplied the water of Oldsmar. And when that was demolished, that I don't know.
Well, the water tower was on Bayview, just across the railroad tracks, just a little ways down from the bank building. Holloway's funeral home sits there now.
No.
But that's where the water tower was. That was replaced with a metal water tower, which I have videos of when they tore it down back in the late 50s. They destroyed that. Now, Lon Gamble, the son of this Gamble you're talking about, used to run every morning and go down to the water tower and pump the water in it.
Oh, he had a manual pump?
Manual pump.
Manual operation.
Right.
About the only other thing of importance or maybe amusement that I can think of is this hurricane you was talking about. We had a hurricane in 21, some say 27, but I think it's 21, that flooded Oldsmar. And I had a great uncle, the one that gathered these oysters off of Booth's Point. His name was Frank Redding. He lived on this peninsula between Moccasin Creek and what the Long Bridge is now, called the head of the bay. They're kind of behind what is now the turf bar or grill, whatever. But him and his wife and daughter lived there. Of course, before the days of hurricane information, somehow or another, old knowledge told him a storm was coming. So he picks up his daughter and carries her to the west, out through the woods, over close to where opposite Cox Lumber or Spare Rand is, and put her on a large stump and told her to stay there until he come back. So he went back and got his wife, and they went and evacuated to somewhere, I don't know where, during this hurricane. And when they come back, their home was destroyed. And for weeks they went along the shores of Moccasin Creek and Possum Bayou, gathering up her canned goods that she had jarred, vegetables, fruits, berries. And what they did later, I don't know. Now these stories come from my mother because this was her uncle and my great uncle. But back in those days, you could go out in those wooded areas toward Brooker Creek and gather all kind of huckleberries and blueberries, blackberries. And they utilized all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, Oldsmar holds a lot of stories, and it's people like you that keep our history alive, and we appreciate that. I do know now that the two redheads probably brought a lot of young men into the city of Oldsmar back in those days.
Yes.
Anyway, we thank you for your sharing this knowledge with us, and I know that people like you help preserve the knowledge and the history of Safety Harbor and the city of Oldsmar, and this is what this interview is all about. And J.W. Campbell, thank you.
Okay, and thank you too, Jerry. I'm glad to be able to give this out while I'm still able.
Thank you. And
because my years is passing fast.
And we want to give this to the citizens of Oldsmar, and I want to thank TCI for helping us do this. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jerry.